Detroit News, April 2026. Citing Bahamian authorities directly, not anonymous sources, not community speculation, not whispers from someone close to the case. Citing Bahamian authorities on the public record, electronic devices were removed from the sailboat Soulmate under the authority of a judicial search warrant. And those devices are currently being reviewed by the same investigators who have publicly designated Brian Hooker a suspect in the disappearance of his wife, Lynette. That is the confirmation. That is the fact. And if you have been following this case from the beginning, you already understand exactly why that sentence lands the way it lands. Let me say it one more time, clearly, so there is no ambiguity about what has and has not been established on the public record. Bahamian authorities confirmed to the Detroit News that electronic devices were seized from the Soulmate, the sailboat where Lynette Hooker was last seen alive, under a search warrant signed by a judge. Those devices are under active review. Brian Hooker, who by his own account was the only adult aboard that vessel when his wife disappeared, is not in the Bahamas. He is in Kalamazoo County, Michigan, represented by a new attorney who has publicly declined to confirm whether he intends to return to the country where the investigation is running, a judicial warrant, an active evidence review, a named suspect who has crossed an international border. These three facts did not exist together in the confirmed public record before this week. They do now. This is what changed. Before this week, what the public had on the investigative side of this case were statements, the Bahamian Police Commissioner designating Brian a suspect, community tracking of his movements after release, reports from people close to the investigation about what the boat's navigational data appeared to show. All of that was real, but it was a collection of statements, some official, some single source, some from individuals whose proximity to the investigation gave them knowledge but also gave them perspective. What the Detroit News confirmation introduces is something structurally different. It is not a statement about what investigators believe. It is a confirmation of what investigators did. There is a fundamental difference between authorities think this boat has something to tell us and authorities went before a judge, obtained judicial authorization, boarded the boat, removed the electronics, and are currently reading them. One is an opinion about an investigation. The other is a confirmed fact about its current operational state. That distinction matters because the second thing is harder to walk back. A press conference can be recontextualized. A statement can be revised. A search warrant cannot be unexecuted. Evidence seized under judicial authority has been seized. It is inside a formal chain of custody. It is being processed. Whatever is on those devices is on those devices, and the review now underway will determine what that is. That is why this is the week this case moved from a phase defined by what people were saying about it to a phase defined by what investigators are reading from it. Before we go further into what this confirmation means, what the warrant process actually tells us, what the AIS data has been publicly reported to show, and what the digital forensics of a seized vessel look like in practice. If you are not already subscribed to When Nobody's Watching, now is the moment. This channel covers cases like the Lynette Hooker investigation, the way they deserve to be covered, verified reporting, labeled analysis, the discipline to tell you what we know, what we do not know, and exactly what the difference is. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell. In this case, the next development may be the most consequential one the investigation has produced. Before we go back to the evidence, drop something in the comments right now. Which piece of evidence do you believe will be the first to produce a publicly reportable finding? The AIS transponder data or the broader electronic device review? Tell me where you are and why. This community has been one of the sharpest I have seen tracking any case on this channel. Now, back to the Soulmate. For any viewer coming to this case for the first time, here is the baseline. Lynette Hooker and her husband Brian were living aboard their sailboat, the Soulmate, in the Bahamas, what the sailing community calls live-aboard cruising, an extended ocean passage that had brought them to Bahamian waters. On the day Lynette disappeared, Brian's account, the one he gave publicly and in his interactions with Bahamian authorities, is that he realized his wife was not on the boat, searched for her, could not find her, and paddled a dinghy approximately 4 miles to Marsh Harbor to report her missing. He was detained by Bahamian authorities. He was subsequently released. The day after his release, according to multiple outlets, he departed the Bahamas on a commercial flight with California listed as his destination. He did not remain in the Bahamas. He did not remain near the Soulmate. He flew out and has since been located in Kalamazoo County, Michigan, where he has retained a new attorney. The Bahamian police commissioner has publicly designated Brian Hooker a suspect in connection with Lynette's disappearance. That designation has not been retracted. He has not been charged with any crime. He is presumed innocent. Those three facts coexist in the public record simultaneously: suspect, uncharged, presumed innocent. And it is important not to collapse them into something simpler than they are, because they are not the same thing. The Soulmate remained in Marsh Harbor after Brian's departure, and as of this week, we know that the time between his departure and this confirmation was not idle time for investigators. They were working. Before we go one more word further into warrants and device forensics and AIS transponders, we are going to stop and spend time with Lynette Hooker, because she is the reason any of this matters. She is the reason this community has been watching for months. And no evidentiary analysis should ever put enough distance between the audience and the human being at the center of a case like this, that the forensics start to feel more real than the person does. Lynette was not a case file. She was not an entry in an investigative timeline. She was a woman who made the kind of choice that a lot of people spend their whole lives dreaming about, and very few actually follow through on. She and Brian sold what most people would call a normal life, bought a sailboat, and went to sea. That takes a particular kind of deliberate courage, the willingness to trust yourself and to trust your partner to something much larger and less predictable than anything most people choose to live inside of. The people who knew Lynette described someone who was fully present in that life, not reluctantly along for someone else's dream, fully in it, engaged with the people she loved, even from a distance, maintaining connections across the water with the consistency of someone who is genuinely content. She was the kind of person whose absence does not go quietly unnoticed, because she was never the kind of person who was casually absent. Her family has been public throughout this investigation. They have cooperated with authorities. They have spoken. They have made sure the world does not forget who is at the center of this case. That is what families in their position have to do when sustained public attention is the only leverage they have, and they have not let the world look away. Every warrant in this video, every reference to an AIS transponder, every discussion of chain of custody and digital forensics, all of it exists because a woman named Lynette Hooker is missing, and the people who love her deserve to know what happened to her. The boat can be searched, the devices can be read, the evidence can be analyzed, all of it in service of one thing: the truth about what happened on the water the day she disappeared. The word warrant gets used frequently in true crime coverage, and it is worth slowing down on what it represents in a case like this one, because casual use of the word obscures the weight of what it signals as a legal and investigative event. A search warrant is not a suggestion. It is not a courtesy request made to a boat's owner. It is a judicial instrument, a formal document signed by a sitting judge that authorizes law enforcement to enter a specific location, search for specific categories of evidence, and remove what they find within the boundaries of that authorization. To obtain one, investigators must go before a court, typically through written applications supported by sworn testimony, and demonstrate what the law calls probable cause. Probable cause is frequently misunderstood in public discussion. It does not mean proof. It does not mean certainty. It does not mean investigators have already established that a crime occurred. It means a reasonable basis, the kind of factual basis that a neutral, independent judge, reviewing what investigators have presented, would agree justifies the search. The judge is not making a finding of guilt. The judge is saying, based on what has been brought before me, there is enough reason to believe evidence of a crime may be found in this specific place to authorize this search. That threshold had to be met before investigators could board the Soulmate and remove its electronics. It was met. The Bahamas operates under a common law legal system inherited from its British Commonwealth history. The warrant executed on the Soulmate is not bureaucratic paperwork. It is a judicial decision made by a person whose job is to evaluate evidence independently of the investigators requesting authorization. A judge looked at what investigators presented and agreed there was a reasonable basis to search that vessel. Once items are seized, they enter the evidentiary chain of custody. Every item is logged, every serial number is recorded, every device is tracked from the moment it leaves the location, through every hand that touches it, every lab that images it, every analyst who examines it. The integrity of that chain is the foundation of whether evidence can survive a legal challenge in court. Breaking it is precisely what defense attorneys are trained to find and exploit. Investigators executing a warrant know this. They document everything with that in mind. The Detroit News confirmation therefore carries two pieces of information simultaneously. A judge agreed there was probable cause to look, and the process for handling what was found was correctly initiated from the beginning. Both of those things matter for what follows. None of it means charges are coming, but it means the evidentiary clock, from seizure to analysis to finding to potential decision, has been formally started by a judge's independent determination that there was enough reason to look. There is a second technical concept essential to understanding this case, and it lives directly inside the category called electronic devices. It is the AIS system, and the way it operates is precisely what makes it significant here. AIS stands for Automatic Identification System. It is maritime safety equipment common to cruising sailboats like the Soulmate. Its purpose is collision avoidance. The system broadcasts a vessel's identity, position, speed, course, and timestamp at regular intervals, typically every 2 to 10 seconds for a vessel underway. Every vessel within range and every shore station with reception capability receives that broadcast simultaneously. The byproduct of that function is a record that does not care what anyone says happened, a record that reflects only what the vessel's navigation systems reported in real time to receivers distributed across the maritime landscape. Receivers the vessel's owner does not control and in most cases cannot access to modify. AIS transmissions are broadcasts. Every receiver within radio range picks them up at the same moment. Shore stations operated by maritime authorities, other vessels in the vicinity, and satellites in low Earth orbit all receive them simultaneously. Many of those receivers feed into vessel tracking networks, some publicly accessible, some subscription-based, that archive position histories for every vessel they hear. The Soulmate's AIS track, to the extent it was transmitting in range of receivers during the relevant period, exists not only on the boat's own hardware, it exists in third-party archives that no one connected to this case has the ability to alter. This has a specific forensic implication. Even if the AIS unit aboard the Soulmate had been damaged, turned off, or had its internal storage cleared, and there is no public indication any of those things occurred, the independent record of its transmissions would still exist in systems held by separate parties. AIS is a broadcast system. You cannot unbroadcast a signal that has already been received. Now, here is what has been publicly reported about the Soulmate's AIS data specifically. Carly Ellsworth, a person who has spoken publicly and at length about this case, made statements reported by multiple outlets indicating that the AIS data reflected the Soulmate in motion during the period when Brian has stated he was not aboard. Specifically, she characterized the data as showing the boat moving during the window, when Brian, by his own account, was paddling a dinghy approximately 4 miles to Marsh Harbor. This is Carly Ellsworth's account of what the data reflects. It has not been officially released by Bahamian investigators. It is single-source reporting, publicly stated and attributed, but not a confirmed investigative finding. It is labeled as such throughout this video. The reason it matters, even with that caveat, is the forensic logic. A boat moves because something moves it: wind, current, engine, or sail. Each of those scenarios produces a different signature in the AIS record. Velocity profiles differ, course consistency differs. A vessel drifting looks different from a vessel under active propulsion. An analyst who knows what they are looking at can distinguish between those scenarios from the data alone. The question that follows from Carly Ellsworth's account is not one that resolves through testimony. It resolves through the data. One additional single-source item is relevant. Investigative journalist Ashley Banfield, on Drop Dead Serious, reported that defense attorney Randy Kessler characterized AIS data as the kind of evidence that, as a defense lawyer, concerned him significantly in a case like this. That is single source, through one journalist, and is cited here for professional context only, not as a confirmed investigative finding. The analytical point, explicitly labeled as analysis, is this. Electronic navigation data that logs a vessel's movements independently of any human account does not require witness cooperation. It says what it says. Whatever the Soulmate systems recorded during the relevant window is what they recorded, and whatever investigators find when they read that record, they will find independent of any testimony offered or withheld. Let me lay out everything on the public record, organized by evidentiary tier, with no mixing of categories. Confirmed, from official statements and named source reporting. The Bahamian police commissioner has publicly designated Brian Hooker a suspect in connection with the disappearance of Lynette Hooker. That statement has not been retracted. Brian was detained by Bahamian authorities following his report of Lynette's disappearance, then released. The day after his release, he departed the Bahamas on a commercial flight. He is currently in Kalamazoo County, Michigan. Brian has retained Crystal Marie Hauer, a Kalamazoo County-based attorney, confirmed by ABC News. When ABC News asked her whether Brian intends to return to the Bahamas, she declined to confirm his return plans. The Detroit News, citing Bahamian authorities on the record, reported that electronic devices were seized from the Soulmate under a search warrant and are currently under active forensic review. The Soulmate remains anchored in Marsh Harbor. Brian is not on it. Single source reporting, reported and attributed, but not officially confirmed. Carly Ellsworth has publicly stated that the AIS data from the Soulmate reflected the vessel in motion during the period Brian has described himself as paddling a dinghy to shore. This has been reported by multiple outlets. It has not been officially confirmed by Bahamian investigative authorities. Defense attorney Randy Kessler's remarks about AIS data, as reported by Ashley Banfield on Drop Dead Serious, are single source and are cited here as professional context, not investigative finding. Analysis. Explicitly labeled, the alignment of confirmed facts creates a coherent shape. A named, unretracted suspect designation. A boat subjected to judicial search. Electronics seized and under active review. An attorney who will not confirm the suspect's return to the jurisdiction running the investigation. A navigational data record publicly characterized as inconsistent with the suspect's stated timeline by someone close to the case. Physical searches that continue. None of that collectively is proof of what happened to Lynette. It is a description of where the investigation sits, in a phase consistent with evidence consolidation before a charging decision, or a determination that the evidence is insufficient for charges. Those are the only two destinations for this phase of the work. The discipline of this channel requires stating clearly what is not known, because the limits of the public record are as important as its contents. The specific contents of the seized devices have not been released. Investigators do not release the findings of an active evidentiary review while it is underway. Doing so would compromise the integrity of the analysis and any prosecution that might follow. The silence on findings is standard practice for this phase, not an indication that nothing has been found. The specific scope of the search warrant is not public, as warrant applications are sealed during active investigations in most common law jurisdictions. What we know is the confirmed category: electronic devices. The full evidentiary basis the judge reviewed before signing that warrant remains sealed. The investigative status of Lynette's physical location is unresolved. Searches continue. No confirmed discovery of Lynette or physical evidence of her fate has been made public as of available reporting. The absence of a confirmed physical finding shapes the evidentiary weight the digital record carries in this investigation. Brian's detailed account of the specific hours in question has not been publicly provided. He has not given a comprehensive statement addressing the specific questions that have emerged around the reported AIS data. His attorney has not addressed those questions on his behalf through the media. This section requires care because the public discussion of this case has at times conflated things the law and journalism both require to be kept separate. Suspect, charged, guilty. These are not synonyms. Brian Hooker is a suspect. That designation came from the Bahamian police commissioner, publicly, on the record, and has not been retracted. Being designated a suspect means investigators have not excluded a person and have reasons to continue examining their connection to events under investigation. It does not mean that person committed a crime. It does not mean evidence sufficient for conviction exists. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. He was detained and released. His departure was made commercially, not under arrest, not under any condition that prevented him from making a different choice. Crystal Marie Hauer is doing what defense attorneys do. She is representing her client. She is not required to share his schedule with journalists or address investigative questions through the press. Her silence on return plans is, from a defense standpoint, unremarkable. It is what competent legal representation looks like. What is notable, and this is analytical, not factual, is the combination of postures taken together. The attorney who cannot confirm return plans. The client who has not spoken publicly on the substance of the case since his release. The boat that stayed in the Bahamas while the person who lived on it flew to Michigan. These are the shapes of the situation as it exists. They do not tell us what happened to Lynette. They tell us where everyone is standing right now. The United States and the Bahamas have an extradition treaty. No extradition proceedings have been publicly reported. That fact is noted as context for the legal landscape this investigation operates within, not as a suggestion of what is coming. The complexity of cross-border cases is a real feature of how international investigations proceed, and crucially, it does not stop the forensic review. The devices do not need Brian to be present to be read. Because the phrase electronic device review can be abstract, it is worth describing what the actual work looks like. Not as speculation about findings, but as a factual account of what forensic digital analysis involves at this stage. When investigators seize electronic devices under a warrant, the first step is not to turn them on and start reading. The first step is forensic imaging, creating a bit-for-bit copy of every storage medium in every device. This image is what analysts work on. The original hardware is preserved in its seized state. Every subsequent analysis runs against the copy, not the original, ensuring the analysis process cannot alter the evidence being analyzed. That protection matters enormously for anything that might eventually appear in a courtroom. With forensic images in hand, analysts use specialized software to examine data. This includes recovery of files that appear deleted. In everyday use, deleting a file does not erase the underlying data. It marks the space as available to be overwritten. Until that space is actually overwritten by new data, the original file is often recoverable. Forensic analysis routinely surfaces information device owners believed was gone. In a missing person investigation tied to a specific vessel and time window, analysts prioritize navigation records, GPS position histories from chart plotters, autopilot waypoints, route logs, AIS hardware internal logs, if the transponder retained records of what it transmitted, communication records, texts, emails, messaging application histories, call logs, application data from any software that captures user activity with timestamps, and device-to-device connection logs, because modern devices pair, sync, and leave traces of those connections on each other. This work is slow by necessity, complex, technical. The reason a review like this takes weeks or months is the volume of data across multiple devices. The challenge of correlating fragmented or partially recovered files into a coherent timeline, and the rigor required to draw defensible conclusions. But when done correctly, it produces a digital picture of events that does not depend on anyone's testimony. Whatever the Soulmate's electronics have to say about the hours surrounding Lynette's disappearance, the investigators now reading them are going to find it. The following is explicitly analytical. Nothing here is reported fact. It is inference from the publicly available record, structured as a framework for understanding where this case may be heading. Framework 1. The timeline holds. The analytical scenario most favorable to Brian is that his account is accurate, that the electronic review will produce nothing inconsistent with his stated timeline, that the AIS data reflects vessel movement consistent with drift or current rather than deliberate navigation, and that investigators ultimately determine the evidence is insufficient to support charges. The case moves toward an unresolved posture. This framework is not impossible. The presumption of innocence demands it be acknowledged. Framework 2. The data contradicts the account. The second analytical scenario is that the electronic devices, the navigation records, the AIS logs, the communication histories, contain information materially inconsistent with the account Brian has given. in ways that investigators and prosecutors determine are not explainable by alternative hypotheses. Under this framework, the review is building the foundation for a charging recommendation. The Bahamian legal system would then face its own decision about whether the evidence supports charges and what those charges would be. It is the second framework that the confirmed public facts, suspect designation, warrant execution, electronic seizure, attorney silence on return, are most structurally consistent with. That is not a conclusion. That is the analytical read on the alignment of confirmed events. What neither framework resolves is Lynette's physical location. The absence of a confirmed physical discovery shapes both scenarios. A prosecution without a body is possible in common law systems when the circumstantial and digital evidence is sufficiently strong. There are documented precedents, but that absence raises the evidentiary weight required of the digital record, which is exactly why the electronics review is the center of this investigation's current phase. The analytical bottom line, stated clearly as analysis, the case is in the phase where evidence is being assembled into whatever picture it makes. That picture will determine what comes next, on its own terms, independent of what anyone on any side of this case wants it to show. As of the date of this video, based on confirmed public reporting, the electronic device review is active. No findings have been released. The review is ongoing and was confirmed to the Detroit News by Bahamian authorities directly. Brian Hooker is in Kalamazoo County, Michigan, represented by Crystal Marie Hauer. No public statement from Brian addressing the substance of the case has been made since his release. His attorney has publicly declined to confirm his return plans to the Bahamas. The Soulmate remains anchored in Marsh Harbor. It has been formally searched under judicial warrant. Electronic devices have been removed and are in the custody of Bahamian investigators. The boat is empty. Physical searches for Lynette continue in and around Marsh Harbor. No confirmed physical discovery has been made public as of available reporting. The suspect designation from the Bahamian Police Commissioner remains on the public record, unretracted, issued by the same investigative body now reviewing the electronics from the vessel. The next material development in this case will most likely come from a finding in the electronic device review that investigators choose to characterize publicly, or from a physical discovery that changes the evidentiary landscape. Both are being actively worked. Neither has a publicly known timeline. Here is the question I want you to take to the comments. Think before you answer, because the reasoning matters more than the conclusion. Of the three evidence streams being actively worked right now, the AIS data, the broader electronic device review, and the ongoing physical searches, which do you believe is most likely to produce the first publicly reportable finding? And what specific element of that stream are you most focused on, and why? This community has tracked this case with a level of rigor that most people outside of it would not believe. Show your work. NCTA. If this is your first time watching when nobody's watching, you found this channel at a moment that matters. The Lynette Hooker case is in the phase where the next development may be the most significant one the investigation has produced. This channel covers this case and others like it, with one standard: confirmed reporting is confirmed, single sources labeled, and analysis is never passed off as fact. That is the standard the audience here has built its trust on. Subscribe, turn on notifications. When the next update breaks in this case, you want to be here for it. This video was produced based entirely on publicly confirmed reporting from the Detroit News, ABC News, WZM13, and News Nation, and on public statements made by officials and individuals close to the investigation, including statements made publicly by Carly Ellsworth. Defense attorney Randy Kessler's remarks regarding AIS data as a category of evidence were drawn from Ashley Banfield's reporting on Drop Dead Serious and are treated throughout as single-source reporting, clearly attributed as such. All analytical inferences presented in this video have been explicitly labeled as analysis rather than confirmed reporting. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime in connection with the disappearance of Lynette Hooker. All individuals named in this video who have not been convicted of a crime are presumed innocent under the law. This video is produced for informational and educational purposes only. It is not legal advice. It is not a verdict. It is a careful and documented account of what the confirmed public record currently shows. Detroit News, April 2026. Bahamian authorities on the record. Electronic devices were removed from the Soulmate under a judicial search warrant, and they are being read right now by investigators who have publicly said, in statements that have not been walked back, that the man who owned that boat is a suspect. Brian is in Michigan. The devices are in the Bahamas. And between those two facts, between the man who left and the electronics that could not leave with him, there is a space where this investigation is currently living. A quiet space from the outside. A space that will not be quiet forever. Whatever is on those devices is what the record shows. It does not care what anyone says happened. It does not require cooperation. It does not wait for anyone to return. The community watching this case has asked for months whether the investigation was actually moving or simply standing still in public view while going nowhere underneath. The confirmation this week answers that question. The electronics are in evidence. The warrant was executed. The review is active. The work was never still. Lynette Hooker's family is still waiting. The people who knew her are still watching. And the devices that were on the boat the last day anyone knows she was alive are being read by people whose job is to find what they contain. When those devices finish speaking, this case will know things it does not know now. And when nobody's watching, will be here when it does.